Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to all member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Center's program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. The new network of Caribbean SBDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format.
Seguimos con español. Español. Perdón. Guillermo.
Testing English channel, 1, 2, testing, testing. First console.
Hold on, give me a second. Ahora estamos con inglés. Después cambias a...
Second console, English channel, testing, 1, 2, okay.
Encudo bien, pero no sé si Ernesto está bien. Déjame un segundo. No sé si debemos esperar a que Ernesto confirme. Solo inglés por ahora, ok. Solo inglés, sí, espérate, es que me está escribiendo. ¿Oíste?
Espera, inglés, Gustavo, ¿puedes seguir?
Testing English again, 1, 2, testing, testing. English channel.
Ajá. Ok, vamos ahora sí a español.
Español.
Español, probamos por favor. Ok. Ok, encudo, ok para Ernesto.
Ok, pasamos a portugués, entonces. ¿Portugués bien?
Ay, dame un segundo, espérame. Encudo sí, ya te confirmo con Ernesto. Portugués ok, perfecto.
Segunda consola bien.
Perfecto.
Ok, francés.
Francés.
Entonces, primera consola bien.
Perfecto, Curo y perfecto, Ernesto. ¿Ok?
Segunda consola bien.
Perfecto.
Ok, listo. Gracias.
Listo. Muy bien, gracias. ¿Me dan la palabra, porfa? Es que no tengo a nadie adentro. Ya, perfecto. Deme un segundo que tengo a alguien de la Cancillería de Guatemala que necesito contactar.
Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo del público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to all member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo de lo público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces nuestro objetivo es que miren el
He/OD.2549/25, which, pursuant to the Article 43 of the Rules of Procedure, is now submitted for consideration by the Permanent Council. If there are no requests for the floor, it is hereby adopted. Before we continue, we would like to express our most sincere congratulations to His Holiness Pope Leo XIV, and we wish him most success. We extend our congratulations to the Permanent Observer Mission of the Holy See and the entire Catholic community worldwide. Before we continue, given our dense agenda today, I'd like to ask the delegations and panelists to please be brief in your interventions, and we need to finish this morning's regular session by 1:00 p.m. on the dot, because we have a solemn session scheduled for 2:30. Therefore, pursuant to Article 46 of the Rules of Procedure, and at the request of the delegation of Guatemala, I would like to ask the Permanent Council if we have an agreement to grant 7 minutes for the intervention to the Minister of Foreign Relations of Guatemala for item 6 on today's order of business. Similarly, I would like to ask if we have agreement from the Permanent Council to grant 10 minutes to the Mexican delegation for its intervention in item 8 of today's order of business in order to read a statement from the delegations of Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Panama, DR, and Uruguay, which will cede their time and not request the floor on that item. If there are no objections or requests for the floor, it's hereby adopted. On the next item, pursuant to the document CP-INF 1056/6/25, I'd like to ask the Permanent Council if we have an agreement to accept the request to include the Permanent Mission of Argentina in the working group of the Permanent Council on Haiti. If there are no observations or requests for the floor, it is adopted. Congratulations, Argentina. I'd now like to ask the Permanent Council if we can agree on the text of the draft resolution commemoration of the bicentennial of the Anti-Fictonic Congress of Panama sent by the delegation of Panama with the co-sponsorship from Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru on the 13th of May. And pursuant to document CP/Doc 6073/25, Rev 1, and submit that for consideration by the 55th regular period of sessions of the General Assembly. If there are no objections, it is hereby adopted. Now, I'd like to ask the Permanent Council if we can adopt the draft resolution, invitations to civil society, the private sector, and other social stakeholders to take place in the 55th regular period of sessions of the GA, which requires authorization by this Permanent Council pursuant to Articles 9, paragraphs C and D, and 10 of the Rules of Procedure of the GA, and that draft is included in document CP/Doc 6099/25. I don't see any requests for the floor. It is hereby adopted. Argentina is requesting the floor. Argentina, please go ahead. Thank you, Chair. We already voted no. I don't want to interrupt that, but I did want to mention, Chair, that the Republic of Argentina is pleased that we have broad participation from civil society at the OAS GA, and yet we believe that it's important for us to establish mechanisms to ensure that the invited mechanisms behave in line with the aim of the OAS Charter and human rights enshrined in the founding documents of this organization, and that is why I believe it would be appropriate before we submit for consideration of the member states the proposal from organizations that would like to be invited that we create a working group that will allow us to determine that makeup prior to the vote. That is what I would like to share from my delegation. Thank you very much, Chair. We note the statement from Argentina, which is duly noted in the record, and the draft was adopted with that comment from Argentina. The next item on the order of business is consideration of the report and recommendation from the General Committee on changes to the rules of procedure of the Permanent Council pursuant to the mandate stemming from Resolution 1275 and pursuant to document CP/CG-2141/25. The proposed amendments to the rules of procedure is a result of a broad consultation and analysis process carried out by the General Committee with the aim of presenting that from the delegations of Antigua and Barbuda, Bolivia, and Brazil. It's a significant step forward in the efforts to ensure predictability, efficiency, and transparency in the operations of this body. At the session on May 14th, 2025, the General Committee agreed to send to the Permanent Council the draft amendments to the Rules of Procedure in document CP/CG-2139/25 Rev 7. That is part of the aforementioned report. I would like to suggest that the Permanent Council, 1, note the report from the General Committee on recommendations for amendments to the Rules of Procedure of the Permanent Council pursuant to document CP/CG-2141/25, pursuant to the mandate stemming from Resolution 1275, adopt the recommendations proposed by the committee as amendments to the text in force for the Rules of Procedure of the Permanent Council in line with that report, and 3, charge the Secretariat with, as soon as possible, distributing the publication of the updated text of the Rules of Procedure in the 4 official languages of the OAS. If we have no objections, it is hereby adopted. Thank you very much to Bolivia, Antigua and Barbuda, and Brazil for obtaining those results. And thank you to all of the delegations that took part. And now we will hear a presentation for the final report of the OAS Electoral Observer Mission to Guatemala in light of the general elections and the legislative elections in June 2023, as well as the second presidential round on August 20, 2023. as requested by the Secretary General pursuant to document CP-INF 1056-9/25. The head of mission, Ambassador Eladio Loizaga, will be presenting a summary of that report. It was distributed to the documents as CP/Doc 6098/25. Before I give the floor to the Chief of Mission, I'd like to recognize and salute His Excellency Carlos Ramiro Martinez Alvarado, the Minister of Foreign Relations of the Republic of Guatemala. He is with us online. Welcome once again, Mr. Minister, to the Permanent Council. And Ambassador, I give you the floor. Please go ahead. Good morning, Chair. We have an issue with the minister's connection right now. He is not connected, and so we would like to ask if we could postpone this item and come back to it at the end of the agenda if there is no problem on your end. I would like to ask the Permanent Council if we can come back to this item. It is agreed. And so we are going on to item 7. Arbitrary detention. Now, at the request of the delegation of Canada, I'd like to give the floor to Ambassador Claudia Escobar Mejia, or give the floor back to Ambassador Claudia Escobar Mejia, the permanent representative of Guatemala and chair of the CIJP, to present on behalf of the Commission the report and recommendations based on consideration of the topic arbitrary detention in relations between states pursuant to the mandate established in Section 9 of Resolution 3030 of the GA. Ambassador, I give you the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Dear representatives, as chair of the CIJP, I am presenting to the Permanent Council the report from the CIJP in regard to arbitrary detention and relations between states pursuant to Section 9 of Resolution AG/Res 3030, international law. That was distributed to the delegations as document CP/CIJP 3058/25 during the current period of sessions 2024-2025. We were responsible for considering this item pursuant to the GA mandate, which establishes that the CIJP shall invite experts from the Inter-American system and others who are recognized on this topic, that is arbitrary detention and relations between states, to a session, and that they report the conclusions and recommendations to the Permanent Council. Pursuant to that mandate, the chair of the CIJP scheduled, in coordination with the Permanent Mission of Canada, the proposing delegation at the GA, a session dedicated to this topic on Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. In preparation for this item on the order of business, the Permanent Mission of Canada prepared a concept note distributed in a timely fashion as document CP/CIJP-302825/25. In the regular session of the CIJP on January 23rd, 2025, we had participation from 3 panelists proposed by Canada, and they provided varying perspectives on this topic. Toby Schwartz, the political consular director on arbitrary detentions and hostages in Canada, presented on the general view of arbitrary detention and its complications at the regional level. Professor Claudio Grossman, a member of the International Independent Panel on Arbitrary Detention in Relations Between States, provided a legal and regulatory analysis. Jorge Toledo, the writer, musician, and survivor of 1,975 days of arbitrary detention, provided his reflection on the human cost of diplomacy with hostages. The panelists provided a concept note and recommendations, including establishing a special rapporteurship or working group at the OAS to monitor and report on arbitrary detentions in our region, to promote a regional legal instrument to explicitly address the issue of arbitrary detention in relations between states, improve cooperation mechanisms between member states in order to provide diplomatic support and ensure accountability, consider addressing this practice as a crime, and it's crucial that hostage diplomacy be included in international, national, and universal legal precedents in order to bring the perpetrators to justice. After presentations from the panel, we had a space for dialogue with member states. At the exchange, we had participation from the delegations of Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Costa Rica, and Panama. The delegations provided recommendations, 9 in all, and we will not read them all out here in the interest of time, but they were all included in the report. Generally, they reflect the interest in continuing to address this topic from the perspective of strengthening international law, promoting and protecting human rights, and strengthening accountability with a view toward preventing this practice and ensuring practices in line with international standards. Similarly, the committee received reports on 2 international efforts underway in different fora presented by Canada. First, the Declaration Against Arbitrary Detention in Relations Between States. It was already supported by over 80 states, 21 of which are members of the OAS, at the UN Forum. The International Independent Panel Forum on Arbitrary Detention and Relations Between States, which is expected to be launched in the summer of 2025, is the second initiative. To conclude, consideration of this topic led to the Commission taking note of the presentations from panelists as well as interventions from member states. All of this is included in the report being presented. The chair of the CAP believes that it has fulfilled the mandate, and now it is up to the Permanent Council to move forward in developing this mandate assigned to it in a coherent fashion and holding a debate in a regular session on the dimension of human rights, international law, and peace security in the case of arbitrary detention and relations between states. The implications of this practice in the Americas, as well as how member states can support the collective efforts in responding and dissuading this topic, and sending the conclusions to the 55th regular session of the GA. I would like to underscore that as chair of the CAP, my responsibility is to share to the Permanent Council the report we've already noted. This document is a benchmark. It is relevant, but it is not the only tool for our deliberations today, as its interpretation would be limited to the mandate given to the Permanent Council and the next steps to be taken in this area. To conclude, as chair of the CAJP, I would like to reiterate my willingness to supporting any monitoring mechanisms as well as technical dialogue, political analysis, with the aim of safeguarding the rights and dignity of all persons throughout the hemisphere. Thank you very much, Chair. I would now like to open the floor to any delegations that would like to refer to this topic on the order of business. Thank you very much.
Passo a palavra à delegação.
Canada.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Chair. The Permanent Mission of Canada is grateful to the presenters and the chair of CAJP for this detailed report on arbitrary detention in relations between states in the Americas. Diplomacy with hostages is extremely concerning at the global scale as well as at the hemispheric scale, and this practice has an international dimension. It means that a state has arbitrarily detained a foreign national with the aim of exerting political pressure. And this impacts individuals and turns them into currency in diplomatic negotiations. Hostage diplomacy is a violation of human rights, international law, and it is a threat to the integrity of diplomatic relations. This practice endangers foreign citizens abroad, it erodes trust between states, and saps away transparency and stability in relations between states. We cannot ignore this threat. During the 2024 GA, the OAS took a historic decision with regard to this issue in its resolution on the rights of individuals in international law. We now have an opportunity ahead of us to take note of the progress that we have achieved.
The CAJP has taken up this issue of arbitrary detention for political leverage in the Americas, a pivotal and unprecedented development in advancing regional dialogue and action on this issue. The CAJP's report has outlined several ways that states and the OAS can address the egregious practice and uphold international law. Speakers recommended, among other things, developing a common legal definition, creating a special rapporteurship or working group within the OAS, considering a regional legal instrument, and strengthening regional protocols for diplomatic coordination. In turn, we heard member states call to support the declaration, strengthen legal mechanisms within the hemisphere, and leverage the OAS's role in norm building and diplomacy. Canada, together with other member states in multilateral arenas, including the OAS and partners in civil society and academia around the world, we are contributing to laying the groundwork in this area. In 2024, Canada launched an international independent panel of legal experts from around the world, including from the Americas, to examine the international legal framework surrounding the issue of arbitrary detention in state-to-state relations, and to make recommendations to address existing gaps in international law. The panel's report, which will feature recommendations to states in the multilateral system, will be published this summer. We look forward to making it available to all member states, including around this table. Canada recommends that the Inter-American Judicial Committee consider this topic in its annual work plan and explore how the panel's findings could be applied within the Inter-American system. We view this as a critical step towards strengthening regional legal frameworks and advancing shared norms to deter the practice of hostage diplomacy. We would welcome the engagement and support of member states in this important effort. And finally, we would like to encourage additional member states to consider joining the 22 countries in the Americas that have already endorsed the Declaration Against Arbitrary Detention in State-to-State Relations. This declaration is a powerful statement of global solidarity against hostage diplomacy. It targets the practice, not any specific state. Earlier this month, we were pleased to welcome Colombia as the most recent endorser of the declaration. We must send a clear message. Hostage diplomacy has no place in our region, nor anywhere in the world. And together, we will fight tirelessly to uphold rights and international law in this matter. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Passo a palavra à delegação do México.
Mexico is recognized.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. My delegation would like to thank you very much for presenting this report. Thank you to the Chair of the CAJP on arbitrary detention in relations between states. We extend our gratitude also to the Permanent Mission of Canada for driving, including this topic on the OAS stage. And Mexico would like to express its interest in consolidating dialogue with regard to arbitrary detention in the Permanent Council and its subsidiary bodies, with the aim of collectively addressing this phenomenon, which is one of the most serious violations of human rights when it is used as a tool for political pressure. Therefore, we would like to put out an urgent call for halting all arbitrary detention for political ends so that states strongly commit to promoting and protecting human rights for all individuals without distinction for their nationality or condition. Mexico categorically rejects arbitrary detentions, particularly those with the aim of influencing the behavior or decisions of a foreign government by detaining its citizens. This practice is a clear violation of international law, and it undermines trust between states, frittering away at the tenets of the multilateral system based on rules. We agree with the conclusion that addressing arbitrary detention requires that we strengthen international law and human rights, setting aside political disturbances between states and reiterating our collective will to act under shared principles. Therefore, we express our will to supporting any collective efforts to find alternatives that are effective and also ensure accountability for violations of human rights, including arbitrary detentions, and ensuring that they are punished effectively. Thank you very much, Chair. Costa Rica, please go ahead. Thank you very much, Chair, distinguished permanent representatives, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General. Costa Rica is grateful for the opportunity of discussing this topic, which touches the very heart of our commitment to human rights and international law. We particularly value the efforts and leadership of the ambassador from the permanent mission of Canada to the OAS for his leadership in promoting this dialogue here and in other multilateral fora. We also are grateful to Ambassador Claudia Escobar as chair of the CAJP for her support to all initiatives in this area. Arbitrary detention is a key violation of international law, including the international law and international human rights law, IHL, independently of wherever it takes place. Any individual, wherever they may be, has the right to full enjoyment of their human rights, particularly freedom and security. These rights, the states must protect in the face of third parties and collective acts by other states in their territory, as established in Article 9 of the International Agreement on Political and Civilian Rights. Pursuant to this principle, we are active participants in the parallel event held in the framework of the 56th regular period of sessions of the Human Rights Council of the United Nations, along with Canada and the United States. There, we reiterated our categorical condemnation of arbitrary detention, particularly when it is used as a tool for political pressure in international relations. Costa Rica reiterates that no individual may be deprived of their freedom or exercising their fundamental rights due to their nationality, ideology, ethnic group, or other special conditions. Arbitrary detentions in the context of international relations not only are a flagrant violation of international law, they also represent a direct affront to human dignity with devastating impacts on individuals, their families, and their communities. As a peaceful nation, which places international law as our first line of defense, we strongly believe in Costa Rica in the supreme responsibility of states to protect their inhabitants in the face of all arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Similarly, we raise our voice as we express that this is an inadmissible practice in solidarity with the victims, the survivors, and their family members. Therefore, we reiterate that any initiative aimed at addressing this scourge must contribute to strengthening international law, avoiding an approach that simply deepens polarization. We need a collective response that is strong, robust, and firmly rooted in principles of international law, and we therefore call on members to actively take part in developing effective mechanisms for preventing international legal cooperation and accountability in this area, protecting human rights as well as preserving the legality of our relations must be a shared objective and it is not negotiable. To conclude, Chair, Costa Rica expresses its staunch belief that the OAS not only can, but it must shoulder its responsibility as an active protagonist in protecting human dignity and promoting solidarity between the peoples of our hemisphere in the face of arbitrary detention as a tool for political coercion between states. There is no room for neutrality or indifference. The time has come for a collective response that is clear and resolute, in line with our shared values and our commitment to protecting and respecting human rights. Thank you very much, Chair.
I now give the floor to the delegation of the Dominican Republic. Thank you. Good morning, all. The delegation of the Dominican Republic thanks this Permanent Council and the Mission of Canada for their efforts to include in this regular session such an important agenda item, as well as the delegation of Guatemala for presenting the report. Similarly, we appreciate the opportunity to participate on an item of great concern for our hemispheric community. Chair, allow me to begin by underlining that arbitrary detention, especially when used as an instrument for political pressure or as a kind of interstate retaliation, is a direct violation of the fundamental international law and our commitments when it comes to human rights, the commitments that all states here have taken on, and the guidelines, the standards that govern the operations of our nations. This is unacceptable. Having people be deprived of their liberty, their freedom, without due process, without access to adequate legal representation, and often without even being made aware of what they're charged of or accused of. These acts violate international human rights, as well as the instruments that clearly establish that all detentions must be legal, proportional, non-discriminatory, and subject to legal supervision. Secondly, the practice of arbitrary detentions as a kind of political retaliation undermines international law, including state sovereignty, respect for the principle of non-intervention, and the assurance of certain kinds of immunities. And these kinds of actions break away from the norms that we have established within the OAS Charter, as well as that of the United Nations, compromising mutual trust and stability in our bilateral and multilateral relations. From the perspective of peace and global security, such practices open up a door to the dangerous normalization of using people as bargaining chips. And this not only puts at risk the security of, or the safety of, journalists, diplomats, etc., as they carry out their functions in abroad. It's an alarming change in our rules-based framework at an international level. Chair, the Dominican Republic trusts that the inter-American community will stay united in rejecting such practices. In that regard, it would be of great importance that we work jointly to strengthen monitoring mechanisms as well as reporting mechanisms for arbitrary detention within the inter-American system, guaranteeing a fast and effective response to different cases, in addition to supporting multilateral mediation whenever there is interstate dispute present that could lead to the that could lead to the use of detaining people arbitrarily so that we can better protect our nationals abroad, including those working in consulates when they find themselves in contexts of detention. Chair, the Dominican Republic reiterates its commitment to the promotion of international human rights, the preservation of peace throughout the Americas. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the delegation of the United States.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing us to speak in support of Canada's report on arbitrary detention in state-to-state relations to the Permanent Council. I am Holly Lindquist Thomas of the State Department's Office for the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, or SPIHA, which works to bring home U.S. nationals wrongfully detained abroad, support the families and detainees when they return, and deter and prevent future cases from happening. Like others here today, the United States has observed a worrisome trend of states detaining foreign nationals under questionable charges as tools for political leverage. Most of us have followed closely recent cases in Iran and Russia, for example, of people being detained for years at a time and used as political bargaining chips. In this hemisphere, the Maduro regime has doubled down on this tactic, unjustly detaining the nationals of many of the countries represented in this room today, with no visits permitted to those detained. Currently, more U.S. nationals are wrongfully detained in Venezuela than in any other country in the world. The spread of state hostage-taking within the hemisphere increases risks to all individuals who live, travel, and work abroad. Further, it exacts a significant toll on victims, their families, and their communities. Effectively addressing this problem will require a collective effort to address ongoing cases, to raise the costs against the perpetrators of state hostage-taking, and to strengthen international law and norms that demonstrate to all that this behavior will not be tolerated by the international community. For this reason, we support Canada's suggestion to send the topic of arbitrary or wrongful detention in state-to-state relations to the Inter-American Juridical Committee for further study. We agree with Canada that the work of the committee would complement the work of the Independent International Panel of Experts, which expects to release its own report very soon. We also understand that we are not sending new resolution text to the General Assembly currently, but we would support a technical resolution at the Permanent Council level to request that the IAGC consider this topic as part of its regular work next year. Thank you.
I now give the floor to the delegation of Argentina. Ambassador, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you to the Mission of Canada for the work undertaken. Thank you to our ambassador from Guatemala in their capacity as chair of the CAJP. Thank you to all of my colleagues who have made spectacular statements thus far, and I don't want to repeat what's already been said because I can very easily align with every one of the statements made already. Clearly, however, when you talk about these matters in general terms, such as arbitrary detention, it seems like we're talking about sort of abstract concepts, ideas that have no direct implication on people, real people, flesh and blood. And sometimes you've got to name things. You have to call them by their name. It's the best way to make use of concrete cases. That way, awareness raising can be more robust because we're all aligned here at the end of the day. So my country, which ever since I arrived here, I've presented my credentials whenever I was brought into the fold. Every time I've had an opportunity to address the ASG, I've always been clear about what priorities I have. For example, bringing greater light to and fight for us being able to achieve freedom for Nahuel Gallo, the Argentinian citizen who is, in theory, of course, arbitrarily detained without any guarantee of due process, with no respect for his human rights, without any possibility of contacting his family, without any international organization being able to ensure what state he's in. And today, despite the statements by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, we have no idea what the conditions of this Argentinian citizen are, since he's currently arbitrarily detained in Venezuela. And I want to use his name specifically because there are lots of them in our continent, many societies, many places where this continues to occur. And don't hope to think that I don't want to make it seem like I think he's the most important case in the Americas, but that's the name, the first and last name of a citizen of the Americas who day after day is suffering, and this is a process that will be over when it's over. There's no way to know what the end date is. It's just a constant situation. The commission of a crime day after day, that's what's happening so long as this citizen is not free. They have no assurances, no guarantees, and many citizens throughout our continent are in the same conditions. And so I apologize for making it so personal here. I don't want to put the case of an Argentinian citizen above that of anyone else's, but I just believe that by using someone's name, we can better understand the concrete suffering happening among those who are arbitrarily detained and the suffering of the family members of those who we don't know where they are. And again, we have experience. We know what hostage taking is like. We know what arbitrary detentions are all about. And building our democracy, something that took 42 years, this is something that we have achieved and built upon such experience. So we care very deeply about making sure that this is on the agenda for the Americas, and it is very deeply linked to the fundamental pillars of this organization. Thank you very much, Chair. There being no further observations, the Chair suggests that the Permanent Council take note of the report presented by the Chair of the CAJP with the recommendations on the item arbitrary detentions in state-to-state relations, contained in document CP/CAJP 3454, fulfilling Mandate 9 of Resolution 3030 of the General Assembly. That said, the Permanent Council can now move forward with its deliberations, taking a space to reflect on the item that was mentioned by the chair of the CAJP. There being no objection, it is so adopted, or so agreed. As moving on to the next item, and with the request of Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Panama, and Dominican Republic, and Uruguay, we will now commemorate the International Day of Women for Peace and for Disarmament. We also want to take this opportunity to congratulate Ambassador Maritza Chan and give her the floor. Ambassador Chan, you have the floor. ASG, Chair of the Permanent Council, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, friends, in my capacity as chair for the first commission for the 70th celebration of this session, I join in the commemoration of the International Day of Women for Peace and Disarmament. This commemoration coincides with the 25th anniversary of Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security, and the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, moments that provide us with a valuable opportunity to reflect on the progress made and the challenges that remain. Allow me to address 4 aspects that I consider crucial. First, Resolution 1325 transformed the international security landscape by recognizing the differentiated impact of conflicts on women and establishing milestones, such as the participation of women at all levels of conflict prevention and resolution, protection against sexual violence in conflict contexts, and the incorporation of gender perspectives in peacekeeping operations. This resolution also promoted accountability mechanisms and the adoption of national action plans by more than 100 member states. However, it presents a critical omission. It does not explicitly address disarmament and arms control, limiting itself to mentioning it only in the context of demobilization. This disconnection has caused both agendas to advance in parallel without the necessary integration. Therefore, the 4 pillars of the Women, Peace, and Security agenda cannot achieve their transformative potential without the full incorporation of arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation. This brings me to the second point, highlighting the visionary contribution of Trinidad and Tobago in promoting Resolution 6569 on women, disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control in 2010, which precisely filled the gap left by Resolution 1325. This initiative established for the first time in the multilateral system the explicit link between women's equitable participation and the effectiveness of disarmament regimes. Resolution 6569 formally connected 2 agendas that had remained artificially separated and was catalytic in incorporating Article 7.4 of the Arms Trade Treaty, which obliges exporting states parties to assess whether conventional weapons could be used to commit or facilitate serious acts of gender-based violence or serious acts of violence against women and children, thus establishing a binding norm in international law. Third, despite both resolutions, the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, UNIDIR, reveals that women constitute only 1/3 of accredited diplomats in multilateral disarmament fora, and only 20% in specialized technical mechanisms. At the current pace, gender parity in disarmament diplomacy will only be achieved by 2040, and among heads of delegation, not until 2065. However, I must highlight that Latin America and the Caribbean is a leader with 46% female participation in these fora. Fourth, I wish to conclude this intervention with an invitation to member states to commit to 3 strategic actions. The first being to implement specific measures to achieve gender parity in the composition of national delegations and increase the number of women heading delegations in all multilateral fora on disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control. Secondly, harmonize the national action plans for the implementation of Resolution 1325 with the national action plans for the implementation of the program of action to prevent, combat, eradicate the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons in all its aspects. The fragmented implementation of these instruments compromises their operational effectiveness and undermines the shared objectives of both normative frameworks. Thirdly, pay special attention to gender analysis in the governance of emerging technologies linked to international security. Autonomous weapons systems, cyber technologies, and artificial intelligence can and should be developed, considering their differentiated impacts, in order to ensure their use in accordance with current international legal obligations and evolving normative standards. The unification of these agendas offers a concrete promise. Disarmament with a gender approach builds sustainable peace. The equal participation of women ensures that this peace benefits us all. I thank you.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Chan. Now I would like to welcome Ms. Alejandra Mora Mora, Executive Secretary for the Inter-American Commission on Women, and I give her the floor. Secretary Mora, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Yes, good morning, Chair. I want to welcome the ASG, the ambassadors, and all the individuals listening in, those who are at the table with us. I want to thank Ambassador Chan as well for her words, because they allow me to really frame the proposal that we want to put forward today. Obviously, thank you to the delegations that put the item forward. Today, we commemorate the International Day for Women in Peace and Disarmament. We want to mention three things in this context. First off, the importance of Resolution 1325 and the successive resolutions. Secondly, the interpretation of the concept that is security in light of new realities throughout the region and the voices and needs that women present. And thirdly, us trying to increase the participation of women in all processes. And obviously that means that we are trying to strengthen that leadership. It's something that we've been working on in hand with the government of Italia Liechtenstein. I would also like to, just like the ambassador did, highlight the relevance of Resolution 1325, because Resolution 1325 and all the following resolutions really changed the paradigm for women as victims, and we recognize that they're not just victims as of conflict. They are those who they are active participants in rebuilding peace processes, and this changes how we see that paradigm, not just when it comes to peace, but also new resolutions on disarmament in general. Secondly, what the region considers to be security. Now, security cannot just be seen as absence of armed conflict. It's something that you need to see as, you have to see it within the context of the region. It's social, it's got to do with the climate, it's affected by poverty, but there are some other conflicts that affect women in the home. What happens in terms of femicide, how women's lives are controlled, what happens along migratory routes to women, organized crime. It's not just the weapons, the money, the drug trafficking. Women's bodies are made use of in that context. And also, it's a space where weapons are an instrument used to control and do away with women's rights to life and to live a life free of violence. So first off, I think that we've made great efforts in this regard, but we have to further deepen our efforts. We need to reconceptualize security. We are completely convinced that the next summit of presidents that will look at the four areas like food security, citizen security, water security, and energy security, they'll have to link this with what we're talking about here, and having women at the center of these processes. There's a tendency to put women in a position of victims alone, or just as mediators. And I want to remind everyone that women have a capacity to build peace and solve conflicts. I want to also recognize the efforts being undertaken, that's true, but we have to remember that we live in one of the most violent regions with the highest numbers of femicide, and that requires strategic action. That's where we need to highlight the need to have more women in leadership roles. And the proposal that we've been making, we were looking at feminist pedagogy with a gender perspective. We're trying to understand women's roles in all kinds of different spheres. We include the fact that women's leadership requires a kind of experience, and that the women themselves will decide how this is going to be carried out. That's why women have played such an important role in the peace building process in Colombia. We see it also happen in Chile. When it comes to women in conflict, often what we look at is the incorporation of a kind of intuition. Women can make use of different tools to build sustainable peace. Betting on women means that we have a different element. This is all about the building of an agenda where women will participate more in building democracy. This is important because women are to be included in an agenda of equality. In negotiations, in training, we have prioritized mapping innovative capacities, developing different scenarios, building different kinds of alliances, strategic communication, cybersecurity, dialogue management. That is what we've been building alongside women, and we've done so in our boot camps. We did it just recently at a meeting that we held with the different ambassadors. As part of our research, in our conversations with women, we have made a key finding that theoretical developments in conflict management, in that context, there is very little participation from women that we've seen thus far. And so we think that this is an opportunity for us. There is an opportunity at the summit where we will discuss these matters, and we will continue to highlight the need for gender parity in such spaces. Thank you very much, Chair. Well, first off, thank you very much, Secretary Mora Mora, for your statement. Ms. Orfe Castillo Osorio will not be able to participate in the commemoration today. But I would like to welcome Diana Lepi, the Director of Services and Assessment for Peace, a civil organization a civil society organization in Mexico. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Hola, buenos días. Good morning, everyone. I am very honored and delighted to be with you at this Permanent Council, commemorating the International Day of Women for Peace and Disarmament. And I am here representing Ms. Orfe. And this brings together 7 countries in the Americas. We will be sharing with some of you some of our reflections that we share on the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. One of the main contributions of women and feminism has been questioning and transforming the traditional concept of security and peace, as these are not gender-neutral concepts. And this has transformed our approach to security and peace from an intersectional and feminist perspective, I will share some of these reflections. First of all, conflict and violence has a different impact on women and communities that live with the historical marginalization and exclusion in LAC. As we've already heard, we have a normalized dynamic of violence where women live with the escalation of criminality. And in that context, as women, we suffer from sexual violence as a tool of war, forced displacement, disappearance of ourselves or our family members, violence when we look for them. Therefore, we need to do away with this idea that women are simply victims. Women are stakeholders and active participants in building peace. Women and our communities build our social fabric, and we create daily peace. We drive dialogue activities with different stakeholders, public policies in different sectors of societies, and many other processes. Ideological feminism is something that we recognize as the tool that has allowed us to recognize each woman as a subject with political agency, with a transformative intention. And so when we talk about ideological feminism, we mean the ability to use dialogue as a tool to transform our normal, an intersectional gender approach, looking for what we share and avoiding the imposition of some visions over others. And in that sense, the lack of women at negotiation tables and in dialogue processes at any level highlights the need for women to be included in peace accords and do away with patriarchal standards if we are going to truly transform relations. Fourth, it's fundamental for us to define security from a women's perspective. The security that we need is not one with weapons or increasing military budgets, but rather this means security that ensures that we are able to walk the streets without fear, enjoy our environments free of violence and precarity. And that means, on one hand, that we must understand security as a mechanism, as a tool for peace. We must redefine the architecture of security. And peace is something that might be understood as something beyond the lack of weapons. But we must look at the perception of security that we live in every day. We must question security that is focused on the state as the main stakeholder and build relations of trust based on human rights understanding and the right to life, promoting conflict resolution by driving dialogue processes in a constructive fashion. 5, we must recover the memory with mechanisms for transformative justice, with a gender approach which is indispensable. International tribunals have to be strengthened and able to seek to addressing sexual violence and conflict and war and ensure reparations for the survivors. And above all, to build a culture through symbolic policies that recover the aspiration of peace and dignity. 6, in national policies, we must be inclusive. Plans of action in over 100 countries must be flexible and open, accessible. We know that having a role in public policies can transform a nation. And it also means that we create conditions to live a life with human rights. Women and ideological feminism are not just here to denounce inequality. We have, in large part, sustained and continue to sustain the social fabric. Our greatest legacy will be gender equality and social justice rather than simply lasting peace. Equality for women in all peace processes, ensuring that they are able to live in security and work on behalf of our societies, for our societies. Thank you very much.
Com a permissão das delegações.
With the permission of the delegations, I will now give the floor to Mexico to read a joint declaration on behalf of the delegations of Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Panama, DR, and Uruguay. Ambassador, I give you the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Las delegaciones de Bolivia, Brasil, Canadá.
Thank you, Chair. The delegations of Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Panama, DR, and Uruguay join our voices to commemorate the International Day of Women for Peace and Disarmament, held each year on the 24th of May. This is a date that was originally established by feminist and pacifist groups from Europe, and it is held globally, including in the Americas. We understand peace as a continuous process for social justice based on sustainable equality and the transformation of structures of power which perpetuate violence. Resolution 1325 from the UN Security Council on Women, Peace, and Security recognizes for the very first time the differentiated and disproportionate impact that armed conflict and insecurity situations have on women and girls, and reiterated the indispensable role played by all women as central drivers of conflict prevention and resolution, including in maintaining and consolidating peace. In 2016, through the resolution AR 7262 and AG Res 8222, the GA and Permanent Council of the United Nations recognized the need to achieve sustainable peace, understood as an objective and comprehensive process. It responds to the deep-rooted causes of conflict related to a lack of justice, economic and social inequalities, as well as violations of human rights. Almost 25 years after the adoption of the emblematic Resolution 1325 and the 9 subsequent resolutions adopted on the WPS agenda by the Security Council have demonstrated that fair, equal and meaningful participation of women and girls in peace and security is essential in order to attain sustainable, lasting peace, as well as building stronger and more inclusive democracies. Since 2010, the UNGA has adopted on 9 opportunities the resolution on women, disarmament and non-proliferation and arms control, which urges member states, regional and super-regional organizations, as well as specialized organizations to promote equitable representation of women in all decision-making processes in these agendas. Latin America and the Caribbean have been characterized by our peaceful nature, and this is we see the important link between disarmament and gender in the framework in the Organism for Banning Nuclear Weapons and LAC. Member states of the Tlatelolco Treaty have, since 2021, promoted the resolution Gender Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, in which we recognize the valuable contribution of women in this agenda, and we urge the states to promote women's equal participation in disarmament issues. Therefore, the Program of Action on Light and Small Weapons as a global framework for managing ammunition recognizes that there is a devastating and differentiated impact on women and girls, as well as the elderly, due to the proliferation, trafficking, and digression of weapons, as well as the inefficient management of conventional weapons throughout their life cycle. We also recognize the existence of gaps in integrating a gender perspective in these agendas, and this has prevented better understanding of these impacts. Therefore, we express the need to incorporate this comprehensive feminist agenda, as well as the decolonialist movement, as cross-cutting factors to seeking solutions and building sustainable peace through social justice and strict respect for human dignity. We reiterate our commitment to eradicating all forms of discrimination, particularly those that exclude and render invisible the needs and contributions of indigenous and Afro-descendant populations in our region. We are concerned as we bear witness to the lack of representation of women in multilateral disarmament forum, as well as fora on disarmament and weapons control, in line with recommendation 40 for the elimination of discrimination against women, in which it states that though women are key drivers of sustainable peace, we see that they are often underrepresented in conflict prevention and sustainable peace or peace negotiations. For example, in 2023, none of the peace agreements achieved included among their signatories representatives of women's groups. We would like to share an urgent call to member states and permanent observers, as well as the General Secretariat of the OAS, to guarantee full, equal, meaningful, and safe participation of women in all stages of decision-making and negotiation processes, including in technical, scientific, diplomatic, and political spaces related to peace and security in the global levels. We urge us all to adopt these 7 pillars of this recommendations, including aspiring to total parity between women and men throughout all decision-making processes as a universal standard. Youth leadership, effective leadership, an intersectional approach, the cross-cutting approach of gender in all spheres of political and public life, a social structure transformation in order to ensure equal and inclusive representation of women and representation of civil society in decision-making spaces. We express our support for the work of the Inter-American Commission on Women in this agenda, and we welcome their participation in all negotiations, fora, and deliberations in the area of disarmament, peace, and security, both at the regional and international levels. We commemorate this International Day of Women for Peace and Disarmament in 2025 and reiterate the importance of adopting a gender perspective as an intersectional approach throughout all processes aimed at preventing conflict, building peace, and disarmament. We urge member states to transform institutional structures and promote equal, safe, meaningful participation of all women, as well as to promote the intergenerational leadership in all peace and security instances, including the evaluation of ethical, legal, and human rights implications of the use of new technologies such as AI in the military realm. Thank you very much.
Obrigado.
Thank you. I'd like to give the floor to the delegations that would like to refer to this item on the order of business, and I will first give the floor to Jamaica.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me thank the distinguished presenters that have made such invaluable and inspiring presentations earlier. International Day for Women for Peace and Disarmament is a day to celebrate women's voice for a world free from threat of nuclear arms. We celebrate diplomacy, human decency, and a violence-free and peaceful world. Chair, Security Council Resolution 1325 of 2000 and subsequent resolutions on women and peace and security acknowledge the differentiated impact of armed conflict on women and that women's participation is vital to broader objectives for international peace and security. Nevertheless, women remain underrepresented and make up only approximately 1/3 of participants in multilateral disarmament meetings. Even fewer are heads of delegations. Moreover, disarmament is central for achieving global gender equality, which has been affirmed in the Convention of the Elimination of Disarmament Against Women in 1979 and in the 1995 landmark Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action on Women's Rights. Linking disarmament and efforts for gender equality is also key for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, including Goal 5 on gender equality. Chair, please allow me to highlight another important area, which is cybersecurity. Women and girls have made significant contributions to science and technology, but still remain underrepresented in the field of cybersecurity due to the strong male-dominated culture. Women and girls are therefore being encouraged to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, STEM, to increase participation in these fields in the future, providing equal access to education and training opportunities for women and girls to advance in STEM fields. This will not only empower them, but also contribute to the advancement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Encouraging women in leadership roles in the field of cybersecurity will also promote gender equality. And this faced by women in the digital world, inclusive of lack of women's participation, cyber violence against women and girls, and gender bias. Enhanced participation of women and girls in this space can be an effective tool to raise awareness and address issues of violence against women and girls. Social media platforms can be used to create awareness and educate women on their digital rights. Digital media can also be used to provide support and resources to women who are victims of cybercrime, inclusive of online threats, cybersecurity issues, cybercrimes, online harassment, and cyberstalking. Chair, encouraging women to lead transformative innovation in cybersecurity can help bring a diverse perspective to cybersecurity challenges, and the use of digital media can be an effective tool to address issues of violence affecting women and girls. In promoting cybersecurity with a gender perspective, we can create a safer and more equitable digital world for all, inclusive of women and girls. Chair, I thank you.
Passa a palavra.
Ecuador is recognized. Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to thank the presenters for this fascinating and pertinent reflection, recognizing the cross-cutting nature of Resolution 1325 as one of the most representative resolutions that establishes a point of inflection as it recognizes an intersectional perspective. Conflicts have a disproportionate impact on the life and integrity of women and girls. In the framework of its membership as a non-permanent member of the Security Council, Ecuador deepened this topic as one of our priorities as part of our participation, and therefore, during our chairmanship, convened a debate on the threat of the individual use of small and light weapons and ammunition, particularly the differentiated impact of weapons on women and girls, as well as the role that they should play in disarmament. The illicit traffic of weapons has a greater impact on women, among others, due to its relationship with sexual violence. 70 to 90% of cases of sexual violence related to conflict involve the use of small weapons pursuant to UN reports. Ecuador, therefore, would like to call for states to cooperate as we take on the illicit traffic of weapons and fight all forms of organized crime. In that sense, Ecuador also has created its plan of action with its main objectives, which are preventing, protecting, caring for, and sanctioning violence against women in the context of conflict, creating spaces for women and girls and women's organizations to exercise their voice, leadership, and agency in building and maintaining peace, and increasing resilience of communities impacted by conflict, with a focus on human security. As noted by the representative of Ecuador, we need greater involvement of women in the face of the emergency situation faced in our countries. Insecurity, violence, crime, and increasing social conflict have had a major impact on the life of women, as well as the risk of greater violence and its relationship with organized crime, violence, and women who are human rights defenders, trafficking in persons, as well as intersectional discrimination. This is the first national plan of action for WPS, and it shows Ecuador's priorities when it comes to the issue of security, gender, and justice. Ecuador has included women being in strategic spaces, and we increasingly see more women in the military and police forces, as well as in other positions responsible for managing peace and security. We salute and pay tribute to female peace builders and mediators, and we urge you to multiply their experiences for the good of society in general. Thank you.
Passa a palavra à delegação.
El Salvador is recognized. Ambassador, please go ahead. Thank you very much, Chair. My delegation would like to thank the permanent missions that requested that we include this very important topic on today's agenda. We also thank the panelists for their presentations. The aim of working to build a culture of peace and recognizing the efforts that many women have put forth from the First World War led in 1982 to commemorating every 24th of May, the International Day for Women for Peace and Disarmament. This recognizes the transformative role played by women in building peace, resolving conflict, and building societies that are sustainable and disarmed, particularly when we have over 50 active armed conflicts worldwide, the highest rate since World War II. Chair, El Salvador recognizes the progress of the WPS agenda as a cross-cutting agenda, and we have worked to place these issues in the work of many different fora focused on disarmament and international peace and security, where women's participation is essential. In El Salvador, as a country that provides police forces and troops to peacekeeping efforts, we work to overcome the challenges to women's significant participation in peacekeeping forces and activities. Therefore, we have driven many initiatives with the UN, including the Guardians for Peace project, which focuses on strengthening leadership capacities for women and their empowership in territories worldwide. That project has led to consolidating peace at the UN and activities aimed at highlighting the contributions of women in building peaceful societies in the post-conflict period, as well as addressing the transgenerational impact of violence. Training more women in exchanging experiences in this area is relevant. Therefore, for the first time, we took part in the course for leaders at the UN. This was a high-level training organized by the Department of Peace Operations of the UN with our ambassador to the UN, who was the first Salvadoran and Central American woman to complete that training, also representing an opportunity to share our national experience in peace building and international security. Activities like this and others carried out in the framework of peace consolidation remind us of the need to provide sufficient financing that is predictable and sustainable to continue promoting women's participation in these spaces. To conclude, we reiterate our commitment to the Inter-American mechanisms for preventing violence and promoting a culture of peace. This commemoration must remind us and reach the voice of millions of women worldwide who have spoken out for a world without war, without weapons, and with justice. Thank you very much, Chair. Paraguay. Thank you very much, Chair. My delegation would like to echo the commemoration of the International Day that we are commemorating every May 24th. This is a date that highlights the valuable contribution of women in building a fairer, more peaceful world free of weapons, underscoring the importance of women's active participation in these fundamental processes for international security. We also are invited to reflect on the need to continue promoting their meaningful integration in activities aimed at promoting institutional security, conflict prevention, and building our societies. Paraguay has significantly contributed to peacekeeping through the UN mandate. Since the adoption of Resolution 1325 at the Security Council, we have worked with female members of the military and police officers in peacekeeping operations worldwide, including in Colombia and Haiti. In these scenarios, they have played a key role in supporting vulnerable communities and promoting human rights. In an international context marked by a resurgence of armed conflict, we believe it is indispensable for member states to adopt appropriate measures to ensure the presence and full participation of women in preventing, managing, and resolving conflicts. This approach not only strengthens protection for women's rights, but it also contributes to building fairer, more inclusive, and safe societies. Chair, Paraguay reiterates its commitment to promoting peace and disarmament. We recognize women as active protagonists at all phases of establishing, maintaining, and consolidating peace and international security. We strongly believe that effective inclusion of women as an effort in preventing and resolving conflict is a guarantee to ensuring lasting peace based on social justice and respect for human rights. Thank you very much, Chair. And we recognize St. Kitts and Nevis. Please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, distinguished colleagues, I join colleagues who have expressed thanks to today's panelists for their important and informative perspectives. The delegation of St. Kitts and Nevis is honored to join in commemorating the International Women's Day for Peace and Disarmament, a moment to reflect upon and to amplify the vital contributions of women in fostering peace, advancing disarmament, and shaping a more secure and just world. We salute the courage and resilience and the leadership of women who serve on the front lines and behind the scenes in the global pursuit of peace, whether in negotiating dialogue, leading communities toward reconciliation, or serving with professionalism and distinction in security and peacekeeping missions across the globe. Their participation is not simply symbolic, it is vital. Women bring inclusive perspectives, transformative strategies, and a deep commitment to sustainable peace that benefits all sectors of society. As we continue to build hemispheric security systems rooted in democracy, equity, and human dignity, we have a duty to ensure that the voices of women are not only heard, but empowered in decision-making processes, operational roles, and institutional leadership. As the current chair of the Committee on Hemispheric Security, St. Kitts and Nevis takes enormous pride in noting that the leadership of the committee is currently stewarded entirely by a team of dedicated female diplomats from across the subregions of the Americas, serving in the presidency and first, second, and third vice presidencies. Our stewardship on behalf of our countries and our hemisphere embodies the principle that peace and security are strengthened when inclusive, diverse, and gender-sensitive leadership is embraced at all levels. Let this day of commemoration renew our collective commitment to empowering women as agents of peace and disarmament, not just in recognition, but in actual policy, practice, and partnership. Thank you.
I now give the floor to the delegation of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you, Chair. My delegation welcomes the commemoration of International Women's Day for Peace and Disarmament and takes this opportunity to thank the presenters for their valuable contributions. As Ambassador Chan has highlighted, Trinidad and Tobago has been proactive in promoting women in peace and disarmament, aligning with international frameworks on women, peace, and security. Trinidad and Tobago has emphasized the importance of women's participation in peace processes, recognizing that their involvement leads to more sustainable outcomes. Gender perspectives have also been incorporated into my country's national policies, ensuring that women are part of decision-making processes. Trinidad and Tobago also actively participates in regional and international discussions on disarmament and security, advocating for gender equality and women's empowerment, and has implemented initiatives aimed at enhancing the skills and knowledge of women in peace building and disarmament, among other initiatives. Chair, Trinidad and Tobago not only contributes to global disarmament goals, but also champions the empowerment of women, recognizing their crucial role in fostering peace and security in society. I thank you.
I now give the floor to the delegation of Haiti. Thank you very much, Chair. The ambassador has asked me to extend their their apologies. They have another event to prepare for. The delegation of Haiti wants to thank you, Chair, for including this in the item. Allow me at the outset to congratulate the permanent representative of Costa Rica to the UN, Maritza Shen, and Madam Alejandra Mora, and the regional director for Mesoamerica Chas, Madam Osorio, for their respective statements in the framework of commemorating International Women's Day for Peace and Disarmament. I would also like to welcome the commitment of all the feminists, the women who waged the battle, those women of conviction who got together in the 80s around an ideal of peace and security, and who enshrined May 24th as the International Women's Day for Peace and Disarmament. The commemoration of this day within the OAS's Permanent Council is an act of acknowledgement and gratitude to those who have left this legacy, a feminist legacy of peace. And we must remember all the women throughout our continent who have been sexually abused, harassed, and killed in cold blood by someone wielding a firearm. Chair, the correlation between sexist crime and weapons trafficking, it's important that this connection be recognized. In Haiti, the fight for controlling weapons, as well as the fight for protecting women, are closely linked. Weapons used by armed groups which terrorize, rape, and kill our young women and girls don't come from Haiti. Those weapons come from elsewhere. We must remember that all the other member states in the organization have the responsibility to respect Resolution 2024/753 of the United Nations that states that from the adoption of the current resolution, states must undertake the necessary measures to prevent the arrival of such items, weapons, to Haiti, whether that be by sea, by air, and that includes all related items. That could be weapons, munitions, paramilitary equipment, and to focus on delivering all technical training to ensure that all arms present are used correctly. We want to thank the OAS and member states for the efforts undertaken to establish sustainable solutions when it comes to dealing with arms proliferation throughout the region. In terms of the security situation in Haiti, we are conscious, we are aware that we must redouble our efforts in this fight in order to put an end to the current situation. We are working to fight against gender-based violence, and we are combating the use of arms throughout Haiti. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the representative of the Holy See. Thank you very much, Chair. First off, my appreciation for your words as the chair of the Permanent Council in recognizing the election of Pope Leo XIV. Chair, we welcome the commemoration of International Women's Day for Peace and Disarmament in this Permanent Council. This day is not just an opportunity to remember, it's a call to raise collective awareness and better understand the vital role, the often invisible role of women in building a fairer, more peaceful world, one free of armed conflict. Pope Leo XIV has already expressed his desire for peace. And I quote, "Peace is built in people's hearts." Starting with the work that we are all called on to undertake, we must have dialogue so that we can come together instead of needing to face one another. And the international organizations that were thought up originally to put an end to conflict that could arise within the international community are those who should participate most. And we have to stop creating these instruments of death because, as Pope Francis reminded in his final message, Urbi et Orbi, peace is not possible without true disarmament. And the demand that each that each community has to defend itself should not be an excuse to do away with disarmament. The Holy See finds it timely that we commemorate this day within the international organizations to bring visibility to women who over time and currently are artisans of peace, conflict resolution, and their voices have been instruments for peace in lands that have been scarred by violence. The Holy See has always said that peace is not just an absence of war. It is the result of justice, respect for human dignity, and brotherly love. In that regard, building up women's contributions to this process is not just something we desire, it is absolutely necessary. The Holy See encourages this international organization to continue recognizing the bravery of women in their roles, the roles that they play in disarmament process as well as reconstruction processes. True peace will not come about with weapons. It will come from disarmament within people's hearts, by demilitarizing people's minds, and by recognizing that each life is sacred. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you so much. I now give the floor to the ambassador from Spain.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you so much, Chair. At the outset, allow me to welcome the inclusion of this important point on the agenda for the Permanent Council, the commemoration of International Women's Day for Peace and Disarmament, an international context marked by wars, increasing unprecedented threats to peace and security in an ever-evolving international order, plus significant setbacks in the paths towards progress for women and girls all over the world, mean that the commemoration of the International Women's Day for Peace and Disarmament, according to Resolution 1325, is of increasing importance. We must work together. We must defend the fundamental rights of multilateralism in order to maintain leadership and momentum in an agenda where women can build peace and prevent violence, and so that they don't just represent collateral damage. Spain reiterates its unwavering commitment to the agenda of women, peace, and security. We are currently working on developing our third plan of action, national plan of action, to build on the progress made thus far with a preventive approach and closely linked to the principles of our pioneering foreign policy on women's the feminist agenda. Spain continues to work in every space possible to make progress on the peace agenda and the equality agendas. I don't want to close without expressing my country's deep concern for the horrific suffering present in Gaza. Thousands of women and girls. The news that we receive about the death of 14,000 children. In critical moments, every effort is necessary in order to put an end to human suffering and work towards peace. Thank you so much.
Paso a palabra.
I now give the floor to the delegation of Italy. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. We express our gratitude for the presentation delivered by the Secretary General of the Inter-American Commission on Women, Madam Mora Mora, and we align with the commemoration of this International Women's Day for women and peace, or for women in peace and disarmament. Since 2000, Italy has backed the resolution from the UN Security Council, Women, Peace and Security, Resolution 1325, which is made up of 4 pillars: participation, prevention, construction of reconstruction of areas that are exiting conflict, etc. And this resolution, as can be seen in the statements delivered by the UN Secretary General, brought light to the role of women as victims but also as agents of peace. Namely, Resolution 1889 of 2009 recommends that UN member state countries adopt action plans, national action plans. The Foreign Affairs Ministry in Italy, through the Intergovernmental Committee on Human Rights, has adopted thus far 4 different plans through an inclusive consultation process with universities, research institutions, and, of course, civil society in different capacities. Currently, we are working on a 5th national action plan in Italy, which will shortly be finalized while we celebrate the 25th anniversary of Resolution 1325 and to commemorate the Beijing Action Plan. The work of the Inter-American Commission on Women on Leadership has been quite useful over the years, contributing to greater clarity in many relevant areas. Concerning the Americas, we wanted to bring attention as well to the impact of natural disasters as well as that of organized crime. Thank you very much.
Paso a palabra, delegación.
I now give the floor to the ambassador from France. Thank you very much, Chair. Dear colleagues, France, just like my other observer nation colleagues said, we welcome the commemoration of the International Women's Day for Peace and Disarmament within the OAS. This year, we launched our first international strategy for feminist diplomacy, 2025-2030. The Women, Peace and Security agenda is one of the key chapters in our multilateral efforts, but also it's part of our multinational perspective. We take this perspective into account in our search for peace and security, and to strengthen the rights of women and girls in contexts of security. France has launched its 4th National Action Plan for the implementation of this agenda, Women, Peace and Security. The Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs announced France's first contribution to the Fund for Women, Peace and Humanitarian, the Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund within the United Nations, which seeks to help women and civil society organizations in crisis conflict, in contexts of crisis. There being no further requests for the floor, the chair suggests that the Permanent Council take note of the statements delivered as part of this commemoration, which will be part of the minutes of this meeting. There being no objections, it is so agreed. Agreed. For consideration of the following matter, sent by the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs, I would first like to ask if we could adopt the draft resolution entitled Deadline for Approval of Changes to the Structure of the General Secretariat, agreed by the CAP as document CP/CAAP 4087/25 Rev 4. There being no objection, approved. Pursuant to the resolution that we've just adopted, and as part of the matters related to the structure and administration of the organization's budget, to which the president of the CAP will make reference, I would like to ask the Permanent Council if we could accept the recommendation approved and conveyed by the Commission in document CP/CAP 4087/25 and instruct the General Secretariat to stop the recruitment, selection, appointment, and reclassification processes until the new Secretary General has formally assumed the role. I see no objection. It is so agreed. Next, I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Sebastián Kraljevic, Permanent Representative of Chile and Chairman of the CAP. Ambassador Kraljevic, you have the floor. Thank you so much, Chair. So now that both texts have been adopted, the texts proposed by the CAP, I'd like to take some time to bring the delegation's attention here at the highest level possible to the situation, the financial situation that the OAS is in. I would like to present 4 facts, Chair, in that regard. Some progress that I think is relevant to make mention of, and I would also like to share my opinion. I'll be brief. The first fact I'd like to mention, Chair, is that that thus far, we're finishing the 5th month of the year, only 11 states have paid their quota. The rest have either not paid or have not even presented a plan to pay. The second fact is that this situation, Chair, means that the regular fund is days away from being in default. According to the predictions, thus far, that'll happen at some point in June, in just a few days. The third fact, Chair. Mic for the speaker. Oh, thank you. We had a technical issue. May I continue? Yes? The timer still hasn't begun, so I'm just going to continue to talk. No, we're keeping track of it over here. There was a technical issue is all. I'll go ahead and resume, Chair. So the third fact is that last November, when we adopted the budgetary resolution for the special General Assembly session, we authorized the request of an internal loan up to about 27 million and some change. That's about 30% of the annual quotas. That will happen if our quota issue is not resolved by June. Now, what happens, Chair, if months continue to go by, and 2/3 of the member states still have not paid? Well, then you have the fourth fact. Once we hit September, we will have used up the entire loan. We will have no further instruments, and the fund will end up in default. We have never seen that happen in the past. We've never used that much to cover the deficit. What are we doing about it? Well, we've made some progress, Chair. First off, you've got the agreements that the Council arrived at today. First off, you have a document that says we're going to generate a path to create a more effective and efficient organizational structure. And we hope that this will at least put a stop to all the recruiting that the Secretariat is undertaking currently. What else is being done? The SAF presented in document CP/CAP 4092/25 a series of potential actions that could respond to the crisis with a series of cuts and suspensions, which could help us to respond to the issue with the regular fund. Additionally, the Commission and the CAP are closely following the mandates adopted in the previous General Assembly session, that from November, which would include dealing with the organization's financial situation, and that includes putting 2 properties up for sale, looking at the real estate that the organization currently has and that we simply cannot hold on to. I want to, based on what I've said thus far, say the following. Paying the quotas is critical, more than ever, and this delay is putting the organization's survival at risk. I now want to share a quick opinion. Looking forward, maybe 7 months into the future, Chair, if we look at the beginning of 2026, at the beginning of the year 2026, member states will have to pay their 2026 quota as quickly as possible. We will be on the verge of not having the tools necessary to undertake our efforts if we don't have a robust regular fund. That is what we need before we can decide what the different designations, budgetary designations, are going to be moving into 2026. The CAP is looking for some kind of an agreement, a kind of mixed scheme, and even though this has been put off for some 3 years, establishing a methodology to deal with the quota issue, in June, we'll talk about states trying to rescue the regular fund through to 2026. While we wait on a General Assembly session, probably in October, where we'll look at a resolution and we will be able to figure out where we're headed given the transition with the Secretary General. So, in terms of how much we need to spend, if we have to increase certain amounts, etc., and all of the limitations that I understand different states face, I do ask that member states join in this agreement as quickly as possible. This is my opinion at the end of the day. The viability of our organization depends very much on that agreement arising. Thank you very much. Is there any delegation that would like to make reference to or respond to the statement delivered by the chair of the CAP? That was a deeply concerning statement. Canada, you have the floor, please. Thank you, Chair. I also want to thank the chair of the CAP for updating us on something so important. Canada is deeply concerned by the financial future of the organization. Predictions concerning the situation of our fund are not exactly encouraging. The SAF has also said that we might deplete the loan by September if the significant quota issue is not resolved by then.
Today's CAP report makes it abundantly clear that we are not in normal times. Our financial situation is importantly challenged, and we cannot ignore it. We continue to ask all member states to pay their quotas in full and on time to ensure that the OAS can meet its obligations in helping this region lead itself to greater success. Member states and the Secretariat must be proactive in taking financial measures to limit potential disruptions to our operations, because that is what we are facing. Disruptions, cuts, or otherwise to our operations. We need to curb our expenditures as quickly as possible. We urge the Secretariat to do the following. start paying attention to spending and budget execution levels immediately, maintain a restrained and survivalist view of absolutely focusing on things that are essential or emergency spending only. Inherently, the decisions we make in the coming months about the budget will have a direct impact on our discussions towards the 2026 budget and the success of this organization going into the future. It will therefore be important to strike a delicate balance of ensuring that long-term financial stability is viable for this organization through a cautious budget while providing adequate financial support for the new OAS leadership. Paying our quotas is the minimum we as member states can do if we indeed believe in the mission, mandate, and importance of this organization. The minimum. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There being no further requests for the floor, the chair suggests that the Permanent Council take note of the CAP President's presentation on matters relating to the structure and administration of the organization's budget, as well as the interventions made by the delegation of Canada. If there are no objections, it's agreed? Agreed. The following item. I would ask the Permanent Council if we could approve minutes 2362, 2366, and 2373 of the ordinary sessions of February 16th, March 2nd, and April 6th of 2022, respectively, as well as the minutes 2363, 2364, and 2371 of the extraordinary sessions of February 18th and 25th and March 25th, 2022, respectively. There being no objections, it is so approved. Approved. May we? All right, so let's now return to the item that we had to skip. Item 6 on the agenda. So the following is the final report of the OAS Electoral Observation Mission sent to Guatemala for the general elections and the elections of members of the Central American Parliament on June 25th, 2023, as well as the presidential runoff on August 20th, 2023, in response to the Secretary General's request contained in document CP/INF.10569/25. The head of mission, Ambassador Eladio Loizaga, will present a summary of the report below, which was duly distributed to the delegations as document CP/doc.6098/25. Before giving the floor to the head of the mission, I would like to acknowledge and welcome the virtual presence of the Honorable Carlos Ramiro Martinez Alvarado, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Guatemala. Minister, welcome back to the Permanent Council. I will now give the floor to Ambassador Loizaga for his observations. You have the floor.
Good morning. Ambassador Benoni Belli, Chair of the Permanent Council of the OAS, Secretary General Luis Almagro, Assistant Secretary General Nestor Mendez. Greetings to the Minister of Foreign Relations of Guatemala, Carlos Martinez, distinguished members of the Permanent Council. The Electoral Observation Mission in Guatemala for the general elections and Central American legislative elections held 5 deployments to Guatemala, 2 preliminary visits, and 2 deployments for the election days. Additionally, we had an extraordinary technical deployment of 12 individuals to observe the second election review hearings, which were held in early June 2023, following the order from the Court of Constitutionality. This was not part of the electoral standards. Throughout the electoral process, there was strong political tension, particularly between the first and second rounds. Various stakeholders sought to refuse to recognize, delay, or overturn the official result, suspend one of the options under contention, that is the Semilla movement, and avoid adjudicating the positions of the elected authorities, intimidating electoral bodies, and the personnel hired for that process, as well as supporters of the Semilla movement. They also sought to sow disinformation and plant seeds of doubt in the population so that they had reason to suspect or even delegitimize and erode the democratic process. Despite these serious threats, multiple groups and institutional leadership, political, economic, and social leaders went out to protect the citizens' will expressed at the polling places, and the mission salutes the democratic defense of the Guatemalan population and also recognizes the various manifestations of support for the electoral process by the international community. On August 20th, the second round of the election took place, and Bernardo Arevalo was elected as the President of the Republic by a margin of over 20 percentage points. However, pressure on the electoral process and the handover were not let up. On the contrary, the election of President Arevalo accentuated political tensions and led to new, unfounded questioning of the results, as well as persistent threats for the transfer of power. The mission at all times condemned the political and legal persecution of electoral authorities and those associated with the Semilla movement political party. Accepting the electoral results is not only a democratic imperative, it is the foundation that allows peaceful coexistence in diversity. Additionally, the work of the EOM, the General Secretariat, the Permanent Council of the OAS, and the ICHR focused their attention on the situation underway in Guatemala during the second half of 2023. After August 20th and until the end of December 2023, various OAS delegations visited the country. That included 2 visits from Secretary General Almagro and one of the then chair of the Permanent Council, Ambassador Ronald Sanders, a mission for support and observation of the government transition process, and a mediation mission as well. The Permanent Council debated the situation in Guatemala on no less than 10 occasions, 3 of which during the period between the elections and 7 during the post-electoral period. The positive results of all of these efforts were a clear show of the value and strength of multilateralism expressed in the many different instances of the OAS working for a shared goal. The mission thanks the authorities for their openness and collaboration, as well as the civil servants from the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, the temporary electoral bodies, and the various institutions of the Guatemalan government that allowed for them to carry out their duties. And I would also like to express special gratitude to the Ministry of Foreign Relations and the security forces for their collaboration and support, as well as their protection. The mission also salutes the national and international observation, particularly from the MOE Guatemala and the MOE EU, which with their work contributed to ensuring transparency and trust in a challenging process. The EOM thanks Brazil, Canada, Spain, the United States, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Panama, Peru, and Switzerland for their financial contributions, which made it possible to carry out the various deployments. Also thanks for the ongoing open dialogue shown at all times by the Guatemalan mission to the OAS. During the most critical periods, the spirit of cooperation always prevailed, and special recognition to the Deputy Chief of Mission, Gerardo Sanchez, a member of DECO, who showed his commitment and professionalism in supporting me in this task. Also, thank you very much to the great professional team at the OAS in DECO. To conclude, I'd like to give special thanks on behalf of the mission and myself for the support and confidence in our work from the Permanent Council of the OAS and Secretary General Almagro. This was one of the most challenging EOMs in the history of this organization, and at the same time, it was a joint defense exercise for democracy in the region, an example of the relevance and the strength and force of the principles and mandate that inspire the work of the OAS. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Ambassador, for your words. And now I will give the floor to His Excellency Carlos Ramiro Martinez Alvarado, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala. Minister, welcome, and I give you the floor. Chair of the Permanent Council, Ambassador Benoni Belli, Secretary General of the OAS, Dr. Luis Almagro, Assistant Secretary General, Ambassador Nestor Mendez, Ambassador, and dear friend Eladio Loizaga, the Chief of the OAS Electoral Observation Mission, members, delegates. My delegation is grateful for including this item on today's regular session of the Permanent Council to receive the presentation of the final report from the OAS Electoral Observation Mission, which was very challenging, as we just heard from the ambassador, due to the many circumstances that we faced during the pre- and post-electoral process. This was for the general elections held in Guatemala in 2023, and it culminated with the legitimate election of President Bernardo Arevalo and Vice President Karen Herrera. I reiterate our gratitude and recognition to the General Secretariat and the leadership of Luis Almagro, particularly the Secretariat for Strengthening Democracy, and the Department for Cooperation and Electoral Observation, DECO. Thank you so much for the immediate assistance provided throughout the process. We particularly value the work of the mission led by Ambassador Eladio Loizaga and made up of over 170 observers and specialists who were deployed for both electoral rounds. We underscore that the OAS has deployed 22 electoral observation missions to Guatemala over the years. This has shown the support for our country, and the OAS is maintaining its commitment to continually improving the Guatemalan electoral system through its cooperation projects and observation missions. Guatemala greatly values the role played by the OAS through its electoral observation missions. This mission was broad and multidisciplinary in nature, and it supported each phase of the process until the new government took office. Its work, guided by the principles of impartiality, objectiveness, and professionalism, was key for the process developing with transparency, legitimacy, and credibility. The final report that's being presented today is a testimony of that. As noted in the report, the 2023 elections were held in an environment of strong polarization and institutional challenges. However, Guatemalan citizens responded robustly with courage and democratic conviction. Thanks to that civic commitment, the voice of Guatemalans prevailed, and we were able to ensure a peaceful transfer of power on January 14th, 2024. We note the observations and recommendations contained in the report, in particular those regarding strengthening the electoral justice and promoting political participation of women, indigenous populations, and Afro-descendants. We recognize that we still have challenges to overcome, such as the vote abroad, and we have made great progress in the exercise of political rights for Guatemalan migrants. And we know that we need to take measures to increase their participation rates in future elections. Any democratic process can be improved, and therefore we consider that the findings of the mission are a valuable input for our national reflection and strengthening our democratic institutions. Chair, We value, as we also mentioned in the report, the support from member states during this process. Their presence and support at the Permanent Council is key and gives a strong message to what we already heard from Ambassador Loizaga during the first and second rounds of the election. Its strength and responsibility in defending democratic principles and electoral guarantees were key to the sustainability of national institutions, and there is not a shred of doubt that all of us as the international community must be very vigilant in electoral processes in our hemisphere and strengthen multilateralism in the region. Also, thank you to all of the member states and permanent observers at the OAS for the financing provided to the mission in order for it to achieve its objectives. Chair. Democracy is not limited to Election Day. It is an ongoing effort. It requires the commitment of all sectors of society. With that in mind, Guatemala shall continue to promote an environment of respect, diversity, and participation, as we staunchly believe that institutional strengthening is the path toward consolidating peace, justice, and development. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the Foreign Minister, and now I give the floor to the delegations that would like to speak to this item on our order of business. First, I will recognize Paraguay. Please go ahead. Thank you, Chair. My delegation would like to thank you for presenting the final report of the EOM deployed in Guatemala. And we underscore that that mission was led by the former Foreign Minister of Paraguay, Ambassador Eladio Loizaga, who carried out his duties with a staunch commitment to integrity and independence despite the many challenges that that job entailed. The report reflects the democratic vocation of Guatemala, and we saw this during the peaceful election days in June and August 2023, culminating in the election of President Bernardo Arevalo. We did see rising tensions and some incidents on the ground prior to those election days, as we heard in the report, and yet the elections themselves were peaceful, allowing citizens to express their will clearly and resolutely. And it's important for us to underscore the role played by the head of the mission and the entire team of observers, who at all times displayed professionalism and a commitment to defending the popular vote in line with the essential principle of democracy and peaceful coexistence in Guatemala and in the rest of our hemisphere. In that sense, we also recognize the valuable support provided by the Department for Cooperation and Electoral Observation and the Secretariat for Democratic Strengthening at the OAS. Chair, for Paraguay, EOMs are a fundamental tool in strengthening democracy in our region. Not only do they promote transparency and the legitimacy of elections, they also contribute to preventing conflict, consolidating best practices, and building trust in institutions. The recommendations contained in the reports from these missions are constructive contributions and pertinent to continuously improving our elections at the national levels. Without a doubt, the mission carried out in Guatemala is a show of the positive impact that these activities can have in strengthening capacities of institutions in elections, respect for the rule of law, and consolidating democracy. Finally, we call on the people and government of Guatemala and wish them most success as they consolidate their political and electoral system with the strong desire to see them build a more inclusive, fair, and democratic society. Thank you very much, Chair. Now recognize Mexico. Ambassador, please go ahead. Thank you very much, Chair. Greetings to the Foreign Minister of Guatemala. The Permanent Mission of Mexico, following presentation of the final report of the EOM, from the OAS for the general elections held in Guatemala in 2023 celebrates the efforts put forth by the government of President Arevalo in moving forward with strengthening democracy and consolidating the rule of law in his country. As a permanent representative of Mexico to the OAS, I had the great honor to take part in the mission of 5 ambassadors from this permanent council. We visited Guatemala from the 12th to 14th of January 2024 at the invitation of the Guatemalan government with the aim of supporting the democratic transition, the report on which was just presented on February 7th, 2024 to the Permanent Council. Just a little more than a year after taking office, we recognize the leadership of President Arevalo in defending institutionality and democracy, as well as his commitment to full respect for the popular will expressed at the polls. And we also underscore the measures adopted by his administration to protect social stakeholders and human rights defenders, defenders of indigenous populations and other historically vulnerable groups. This is a show of his commitment to inclusive democracy that guarantees the fundamental freedoms of all individuals without distinction. Mexico reiterates its willingness to continuing to strengthen this bilateral relationship with Guatemala through political dialogue at the highest of levels and cooperation to promote human rights, institutional strengthening, and the well-being of our people. Thank you very much, Chair. Costa Rica. Foreign Minister of Guatemala, Carlos Ramiro Martinez, Chief of Delegation of the EOM in Guatemala, Ambassador Loizaga, dear delegates, good morning to all. At the outset, I'd like to thank the Chair for including this item on today's order of business. Costa Rica reiterates its strong solidarity with the people of Guatemala, a brotherly nation of Central America, which has the full support of Costa Rica for its democratic process. Costa Rica values and strongly defends democratic institutionality and the rule of law, and that is why we have closely monitored the Guatemalan electoral process and recognize the essential role played by all organs of this organization, from the Permanent Council to the General Secretariat. We recognize the professionalism of the members of the Department of Cooperation and Electoral Observation of the OAS, DECO, and thank them for the work carried out, particularly by Ambassador Loizaga, as he worked at the helm of the EOM in Guatemala, both during the election day on June 25th and the second round on August 20th, 2023. That mission confirmed what we had already heard from the Guatemalan people at the polls, a clear will, a legitimate will, to elect their own authorities. Unfortunately, after that democratic expression, we bore witness to worrying attempts at interference and lawfare for political ends. The persecution of electoral officials and the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, as well as acts against the Semilla movement, were clear signs of inappropriate interference undermining the principles of democracy in the Americas. Costa Rica could not stand by in silence in the face of those events, and we condemned the excessive lawfare and interference in the electoral process, which placed the democratic transition and political will at risk. It is important that respect for the people's will is the cornerstone of all democracies. This requires commitment and daily defense. Costa Rica knows very well, and we are very resolute in this. We reiterate our belief that democracy must be protected not only during times of crisis, but every single day, with complete actions and the voice of the states that believe in it. We believe that we have finally seen the transition in a peaceful fashion in January 2024, where our delegation continually supported the transition along with the international community represented at that time in Guatemala City. However, we cannot ignore that the threats to the process have not ceased. That is why we request that the situation in Guatemala continue to be addressed here at the Permanent Council in coordination with the Permanent Mission of Guatemala to the OAS, as a show of the regional support for democracy and so that the inter-American community is able to clearly confirm its support for the electoral process and institutionality in democratic nations, including Guatemala. Defending democracy is a responsibility for all of us, and Costa Rica is on the side of freedom, legality, and respect for the sovereign will of people. Thank you very much.
Passo a palavra à delegação da Bolívia.
Bolivia. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for presenting the final report of the EOM deployed in Guatemala for the general elections and those for the Central American Parliament in June 25th and August 20th, 2023. We also salute the Minister of Foreign Relations of Guatemala, Carlos Ramiro Martinez. These elections in Guatemala were one of the most complex episodes in recent history in our region due to the presence of polarization, disinformation, and high levels of lawfare. Unfortunately, this is something we see being replicated in other countries of our region. We are concerned that the report confirms that though President Arevalo was elected by a margin of over 20 percentage points, the attacks against the government have not let up. We see extreme levels of lawfare, particularly in activities against the Semilla Movement political party, and we have discussed this many times since 2023 in this very permanent council. The political instrumentalization of the Justice Department, or lawfare, is something that was addressed by the ICHR in its 2024 report. It's something that undermines trust in the legal system and fritters away at democracy and institutionality. And we share this concern with the ICHR due to the lawfare underway to criminalize human rights defenders in Guatemala, as well as members of the justice system, indigenous leaders, human rights defenders, and others. We saw that not everyone was able to be here today due to meetings in New York at the UN, but we call on the brotherly nation of Guatemala to strengthen democracy and full respect for human rights, as we did in 2023 when Bolivia joined the special group in this council, which was, and I quote, the key to the final defense of institutionality and democracy in Guatemala during the same transition of power. Thank you very much. The Dominican Republic is recognized. Thank you. First of all, I would like to express our sincere gratitude for the work carried out by the Secretary General of the OAS and the EOM, led by Ambassador Eladio Loizaga, the chief of that mission. And we thank you for presenting that report today. We also are very appreciative and respectful as we salute the Foreign Minister of Guatemala and thank him very much for joining us today. Chair, it is worth noting the very important role played by the OAS in strengthening the democratic processes in our region. Presenting this report is a show of those efforts on behalf of consolidating democracy in the hemisphere. We need to once again highlight the OAS's commitment to democracy, which was shown by sending EOMs to carefully observe the electoral process in Guatemala and to maintain us all updated on the events underway in the face of many challenges and complications. The general elections held in 2023 were a milestone in the recent history of Guatemala. After a pre-electoral season that was characterized by lawfare and political polarization, which undermined democratic institutionality and received the attention of the international community in the face of threats to the integrity of that process, we saw the expression of the popular will at the polling places, and we urged unbreakable commitment to the results validated by international observers. The rigor with which the OAS over the last several decades has addressed situations like the one we saw in Guatemala shows its rigid commitment to human rights and democracy in our region. It is a key stakeholder in promoting these values and also ensures that elections reflect the will of the people. In the case of Guatemala, the EOM from the OAS noted the crucial and positive aspects of that process, such as the electoral organization, citizens' participation, the use of technology in counting votes, and fulfilling legal regulations. This monitoring reflects the public trust in the results and at the same time identifies areas for improvement in future processes. In that order, I would like to highlight the work of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, which is the highest electoral authority and should continue to operate with full independence and autonomy in order to ensure transparent, credible elections. Chair, this scenario should not be seen as an isolated case or just an assessment in a moment of time. It is something that strengthens the role of electoral observation missions as an essential tool for guaranteeing that elections are free, fair, and transparent. The Dominican government expressed its concern in the face of lawfare throughout the electoral process in Guatemala, as well as the attempts to undermine popular will expressed at the polls. For the DR, justice and electoral institutionality are not just impartial. They need to be seen as such for safeguarding public trust in democratic institutions. Against this backdrop, we reiterate our commitment to the principles of the Democratic Charter, and we reiterate our support not only for Guatemala, but also to all peoples of our region as we work to consolidate the principles of democracy, justice, and human rights. Transparency and accountability must guide our countries in their actions. And with that in mind, the DR will continue to be vigilant and committed in supporting Guatemala and the region as a whole in its path toward more robust and resilient democracy. Thank you very much. Chile is recognized.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Our deepest appreciation to Ambassador Loizaga for the presentation, but above all else, for their work at the head of this electoral observation mission. We gain so much learning for the organization, for our council. Namely, there are matters that the report puts forward. I'm going to mention some of the phrases here. It talks about the gravity of the situation in which the electoral observation was carried out. And it also mentions that during the final quarter of that year, Guatemala went through a very difficult period where they almost broke with constitutional order. And from such a perspective, at the time, I can certainly say that the efforts undertaken by the organization and the council itself, through the electoral process and the naming of the individual who won the popular vote, I'm going to continue paraphrasing what's in the report by Loizaga. We are reminded of the relevance of facing the challenges that our democracies face with greater democracy. It behooves us to remember that there is no such thing as a perfect democracy. There is no country in the state, in the hemisphere, or in the world that could claim to have that. But we work to get closer to a perfect democracy in a constructive fashion, and this is the result of the actions of the organization in such contexts and others. I think what Ambassador Martinez was saying is relevant here. The dialogue that was held in this council, the efforts carried out here, the state's capacity as well, recognizing the mission in Guatemala, which really played a key role, and the multiple positions that Chile had at the time, we never lost sight of the dialogue, and we sought to be flexible and not judge one another concerning our positions within crises. We made use of the instruments available to us. This shows us that lessons could be learned and applied to other challenges throughout the hemisphere. As some delegations have said, it's important that we continue to support democratic processes in Guatemala, where we live a sort of déjà vu of certain institutional actors. There are actions that are putting constitutional order at risk and citizen sovereignty, and thereby the rest of the hemisphere. So we have to learn from one another so that we can face these issues and increase and deepen our democracies. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I now give the floor to the Ambassador of Canada. Thank you so much, Chair. We would like at the outset to thank the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Martinez, and Ambassador Loizaga for their presentation and the final report on the OAS's EOM in Guatemala. Thank you also to the work and leadership of the DECO and Secretary General Almagro when it comes to the case of Guatemala, which we're discussing today. Canada specifically wants to congratulate the Guatemalan people for exercising their democratic rights in the 2023 elections and demand that their democratic will be respected with those results. Canada gives great importance to technical support missions undertaken by the OAS. We are proud to contribute to DECO within this context, especially like we've seen in Guatemala.
The elections in 2023 represented a critical moment for the Guatemalan people and democracy. The OAS electoral mission not only played a critical role in ensuring that its elections were free and fair, but also played a critical role in facilitating the peaceful transfer of power, ensuring that the democratic will of the Guatemalan people was respected. There is no better example of the role that this organization can play in promoting and protecting democracy in the Americas. Democracy cannot be taken for granted anywhere. For this reason, it is essential that we learn from our experiences and that the report's recommendations be implemented to consolidate democratic gains in Guatemala and protect against any possible future and anti-democratic actions. Canada welcomes the report's recommendations and is pleased to support DECO's technical assistance program, whose work includes providing support to electoral management bodies in member states such as Guatemala. Canada remains committed to working with Guatemala to uphold their democracy and support the rule of law in that beautiful country. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Passo a palavra.
And I give the floor to the delegation of Argentina. Ambassador. Thank you so much, Chair. I will be brief since we are reaching the end of the meeting. I would like to welcome our friend Carlos Rivera Martinez and recognize Ambassador Luis Saga, ex-ambassador for Guatemala, who have both carried out an important mission for the OAS in observing the elections in Guatemala. And as has already been expressed, he likely had to live one of the most challenging situations in terms of, or at least as far as electoral observations can go. What was at stake was entirely too important, and without a doubt, it's a matter of further cementing solidarity within the Inter-American Charter and further exposing all regimes that do not respect the Charter. Argentina wants to express, as it always has, its unwavering commitment to the Inter-American democratic system, and we stand side by side with the people and government of Guatemala. We will always be available to collaborate, and without a doubt, I do believe that, as the ambassador of Chile was saying, an opportunity for us to learn lessons that we will need to carry forward and think about further in terms of what the OAS's role will be in such missions. The matter of the organization's future relevance is currently being discussed, and there's no doubt that electoral missions are part of that relevance and the strategic role that the OAS plays. We are doing something necessary at a global level. We have to strengthen the democracies of our countries. No one can guarantee that there will not be setbacks. So we can't take this for granted. We have to further cement and consolidate our commitments as we move forward at a country level, but I think that the OAS itself, one of its most relevant areas of action, is precisely this line of work. And so I invite everyone to take the lessons learned from this positive experience for the region, for the people of Guatemala, and that those lessons be applied in future contexts within the organization. Thank you. I now give the floor to the delegation of Peru. Ambassador. Chair. Peru welcomes the presentation of the final report of the electoral observation mission carried out during the general and legislative elections celebrated in Guatemala in 2023. We value the work undertaken by the Organization of American States through its electoral observation missions, which follow electoral commissions to ensure transparency, equity, and legitimacy. Since 1962, the OAS has carried out over 200 EOMs and has become a fundamental pillar of its work. These missions are a tool for strengthening institutions and preventing post-electoral conflict. Thusly, they contribute to electoral stability and democratic governance throughout our hemisphere. Beyond the conclusions contained in the report delivered today, we highlight the series of actions adopted by this Permanent Council before the 2023 Guatemalan electoral process. Among them, you have the Declaration on Recent Events in Guatemala, adopted on September 1st. The extraordinary sessions of the Council held December 18th and October 10th, and the resolutions from January 15th and December 12th on these events concerning events that put the process at risk. We also acknowledge the work done by the Secretary General and the reports which were presented were presented to this council. We also want to highlight the high-level mission made up of 5 permanent observers or permanent missions. All of these efforts reflect the commitment of the organization as a whole to defending and strengthening democracy in Guatemala. Peru reiterates its unwavering support for these principles and values which are enshrined in the OAS Charter and the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the ambassador from Spain. Ambassador, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. Spain would like to welcome the presentation of this report, especially thanks to Ambassador Loizaga, head of mission, as well as to all the electoral observation missions, the General Secretariat, the Department for Electoral Observation, for the rigorous and committed work undertaken throughout the electoral process of 2023 and the post-electoral process in Guatemala. Spain promoted the EOM in 2023. In the complex democratic transition context, we expressed on multiple occasions within this permanent council our support for a democratic transition in Guatemala. We reiterate our commitment here today because that episode was not the end of a process. The challenges remain, and precisely for that reason, the international community, and namely Spain, continue to walk alongside the people and the government of Guatemala in their efforts to strengthen the rule of law, democracy, and human rights. Spain continues to support efforts undertaken in this regard. In 2024, we contributed financially to the mechanism for the follow-up on the IACHR in Guatemala, a project currently underway that has allowed for great progress in improving the fulfillment of recommendations on human rights that the Commission sent to Guatemala with a view to evaluating and promoting their fulfillment, and which has contributed to Guatemala exiting 4B of the IACHR annual evaluation. We also have promoted regional stability through the OAS Peace Project for the adjacency zone between Belize and Guatemala. Today we reiterate that Guatemala has the respectful and unwavering support of Spain on its path towards a more democratic, inclusive, and fairer future. Democracy is not a destination. It is a project that's constantly under construction. And in that regard, we stand by Guatemala. I now give the floor to the observer member, France. You have the floor. Thank you, Chair. France also wants to welcome the role played by the OAS and other institutions in the democratic transition process that was held in Guatemala during the 2023 elections. And just to say that France has fully supported the process, which we did through the OAS, and we continue to support the president on a bilateral level. We had a meeting between the president of Guatemala and Macron this year, and we continue to support the democratic process in Guatemala. Thank you very much.
Obrigado.
Thank you so much. Given that we were able to participate in the mission that observed the electoral process, I just want to add that that experience puts forward many important lessons, as so many of you have stated. And I think the greatest lesson, if you ask me, is that even in times of polarization and distrust in a multilateral context at an international level, you can achieve consensus when you have open, transparent, and inclusive negotiations. And when you have a progressive view. Like our colleague from Chile said. There being no further observations, the chair recommends that we take into consideration the report on Guatemala concerning the general and legislative elections of 2023 and the runoff election in CP/DOC. And we want to thank Ambassador Loizaga, the head of mission, and the members of his team for the work carried out during that observation mission. There being no objection, it is so agreed. Agreed. We conclude the order of business for this session. I now want to offer the floor to any delegation that would like to mention other issues or other matters. Costa Rica, you have the floor. Ambassador, go ahead. Thank you very much, Chair. It's an honor to take the floor on behalf of Costa Rica to share a wonderful bit of news. Thanks to the support from the World Environment Fund, we have ensured new financing that will allow us to create and manage a blue corridor in our country's southern Caribbean Sea. Chair, this is an environmental initiative, but it has great political and regional implications, given that it's part of our blue diplomacy to protect the ocean and marine resources. For that reason, our delegation believes it's relevant that we present it as a best national practice within this permanent council, and we will do the same within the framework of the CD. This strategic project for the Blue Corridor will connect the Cahuita National Park and the Gandoca Manzanillo Wildlife Refuge to conserve critical habitats for species like dolphins, sea turtles, and migratory bird species. This helps us to ensure sustainable situations for coastal communities. This consolidates our commitment to the 30 by 30 goal, which is part of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Global Framework, which establishes the conservation of 30% of terrestrial and marine species. This blue corridor is part of a broader and regional perspective, protecting the marine corridor for the conservation of the East Tropical Pacific, known as CEMAR, which is a regional initiative shared by Colombia, Ecuador, and Panama. And this covers more than 31 million hectares. Together, like with CEMAR, we are committed to achieving the global goal of protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030. This progress comes at a timely moment because we are weeks away from the third United Nations Conference on the Ocean, UNOC 3, to be held in Nice, France, from June 9th to the 13th of this year. And in that regard, it will be an opportunity to accelerate the implementation of SDG 14 and its sub-goals. We would like to extend a cordial invitation to all member states, observers, and partners to join Costa Rica and France in this crucial space to accelerate multilateral oceanic action. In Nice, we hope to consolidate ambitious commitments, innovative alliances, and inclusive solutions that will recognize the value of the ocean as a common resource for all of humankind. Conservation cannot wait, and collective leadership is more urgent now than ever. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the delegation of Haiti. Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to remind representatives of member states and the permanent observers that tomorrow, May 22nd, a symposium on the security situation in Haiti will be held in the Hall of the Americas from 9 to 1 p.m. Invitations have been sent out. That was as of a week ago, and we hope that member states will come in droves tomorrow. This symposium is of great importance for the future of my country, and we appreciate your support, and we count on your presence. So we will see you all tomorrow. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to the delegation of Argentina. Ambassador. Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be brief. In terms of the amount of member states and the colleagues that we have here today, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of the organization the figure and the legacy of Pope Francis. I want to remind colleagues that we're expecting this, that we are holding constructive conversations with different coordinators in order to come up with a concluded effort with and by the General Assembly in Antigua and Barbuda, so that we can have some kind of collective homage. We want to pay collective homage to Pope Francis. I just wanted to put that out there so that everyone is aware that we are working on it, and I hope that if everyone can show flexibility and be and keep a constructive mindset, we will arrive at consensus soon. I'm sure that everyone will be very flexible. You can count on the chair's support if you need assistance in achieving consensus on such an important matter. Finally, I would like to invite all delegations today to participate this afternoon in the PM session. We have our solemn session to pay homage to Secretary General Luis Almagro. He will be leaving the organization. That will happen this afternoon in the Hall of the Americas. There being no further requests for the floor, I want to thank you for your participation. The session is adjourned.